to Mr. Otter Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to paint a black cat using watercolor. So we're going to do a really simple drawing, and then we're going to be using a wet and wet technique to make the fur look furry, and we'll see if it works. This is going to be the first time I've tried it, but hopefully it does. All you need are basic watercolor supplies, watercolor paper. I'm using Mr. Otter Studio's watercolor paper. I'm going to be using a flat 3/4 inch and a number 10 round for this tutorial. You need a pencil and paper, of course some paints, some watercolor paints, water, a paper towel, and that's about it. So this should be a pretty simple technique, but we're going to be using wet and wet to try to get this effect of fur. Let's just draw the basic shapes that we're going to be drawing, and the cat is going to be sitting down with its head on this side of the paper. So to draw the cat's head, we're just going to draw a circle. Draw really lightly, then we're just going to kind of cut the top of the head off with our pencil and draw in some ears. They're more pointed at the top and then they kind of go straight down, so they kind of go to the side of the top and then straight down. Then straight down from the ears, the eyes are a lot further apart than I usually draw them. So I'm just going to draw some circles where those eyes are, and I'll erase this back line and also these lines going over the eye just so it doesn't confuse anybody. And this actually would come in, but this cat has like one of those big manes. So anyway, this is kind of where the chin would be. We're gonna come straight down from the eyes and just kind of indicate where the nose is. So I'm just gonna draw a little line and draw the side of the nose and maybe a little bit of where the mouth might be. Somewhere in there. And then you can indicate where those pupils are in those eyes. If you want it to look like an evil cat, just tilt those lines in a little bit and there you have it. So I'm just going to put a tiny little circle in those eyes to indicate a highlight. And the nose, again, is going to be kind of hidden in black, but it's good to know where it is, and maybe it drops down just a little bit lower than I actually have it. So we just really are going to be able to see this side of the face. And then this is going to be the mane. I don't want to see it very much though, so I'm just going to kind of erase it and just keep the hint of where it is. So I'm just going to kind of put this line inside because I want the fur to go on the outside of it. And then the cat kind of has two little paws curled under its head right here. Then we have this, and then we can see the back side of the cat. It actually comes all the way on the other side of the ears, and then we just see an indication of a leg right there. And then a tail coming out on that side. And this is going to be a cat not with a rounded tail, but with a really fluffy, pointy tail. Okay, so I'm just drawing the tail off to the side. You can draw as big or as small. It kind of looks like a dragon. I've drawn the tail so big. I might shorten it just a little bit. All right, so that's it. That's basically drawing the cat. And now let's go ahead and paint light to dark with our watercolors. We're gonna paint the eyes in, and then around the eyes, and then we're going to paint wet and wet around the eyes. So the eyes aren't going to be wet and wet, and we're gonna paint them very first. And we're basically just using light yellow watercolors. So that's pretty simple to make. All you're doing is just adding water to your yellow, and then just painting it in those areas. I'm just gonna erase some of these lines so that it's not quite so dark. Okay, so just grab your paintbrush. I'm using the number 10 round. Dip into your yellow. You can make this super bright. You can make it a little bit pale if you want. Just grab some yellow and then paint in those eyes. Like this is a lot brighter than I wanted it to be. So I'm just gonna get some of that paint off with my paintbrush. And I don't want to paint in this middle area because I want these little highlights to show up. All right, now while that's drying, not drawing, let's go ahead and mix up our black. We're gonna be using a ton of black. So I guess we don't really need to mix it up, we just need to get it over here. Since we're gonna be painting wet and wet, we could dip straight into our paint tube or tub. All right, now the fun part of this technique is that we are going to be painting really fast because we want it to bleed and we want it to absorb that water. And if we wait too long, it's not going to work. Now is a good time to erase any lines you don't really wanna see. All right, we're ready to paint the wet part. So we're just gonna cover this in water, avoiding the eyes. So we're gonna paint around the eyes. I'm just dipping straight in the water and I'm painting it on my paper. I'm giving myself quite a bit of room around the edges of the cat because I want that fur to look furry, and so I want it to kind of bleed out into those areas. Since we're gonna be using wet, we wanna make sure we just don't overwork our paper. That's sometimes the hardest part with this wet and wet technique. So just the only part you really need to be careful with is around the eyes. Okay, so look from the side, make sure everything is shiny. We have the color on there, and then we're gonna grab our black. I'm gonna dip straight into the black, and I'm just letting it bleed. If I know there's an edge I don't wanna get too close to, I'm going to be a little bit more careful by that edge. Like around the eyes, I want to be careful. So I'm just dipping straight into my black since this is one of those areas, and then I want to make sure I can see around the face, and then I want to see that there is a shape back here for the leg, but I am leaving some water in between. And it's kind of all pushing it that way. I'm not sure why, but that's the fun thing with painting like this is you've just gotta go with it and let it kind of do its thing. And if you start to see these lines getting not furry and fuzzy, just get your brush, get it wet, and oh man, this cat just got crazy. All right, let's come into the tail really quick. I'm gonna just add more water. I feel like this is drying a little bit too fast. So you see how the wet areas just kind of make it bleed and go all crazy. So the fun thing with painting like this is there's no wrong or right way to do it. It lets watercolor do what it does best, bleed and run and flow out. So any areas that I just feel like it's maybe flown a little bit too much, I can just kind of start to soak up with water. So like I don't want my tail to be quite so heavy down there, so I'm just soaking up water and I'm coming in and just pulling up some of the paint that I've laid down. And again, I'm trying to be really careful not to overwork it. Okay, while those areas are kind of drying and doing their thing, I'm just gonna come back into the eye and I'm gonna paint these areas in solid black. It's kind of hard to get the detail, and I'm gonna paint this middle part in. And just be careful when you're painting in the eye to leave that little highlight. You don't have to, but if you want it, then just paint around it. And then you can come back in with your darker color, and we could put some darker areas like under the nose right here. So I'm just adding that dark back in, just showing like a hint that there's something there. I could bring this all the way across and we could see a line on the side of the nose. This is a really fun technique though, and I actually got this idea from an artist. So he actually paints black cats, and I was looking and I really liked his technique. The fun thing about it is how furry they look. These eyes don't look great, so I think I might try one more cat this way. Mr. Otter Studio Extra Audio for Watercolor Black Cat. All right, as you can see, just a second. All right, as you can see, I tried a few more times, and in the end, my favorite was the first one that I did. So if you're trying this technique, I would definitely recommend have 4 papers ready, have 3 to 4 papers ready, and try this technique a few different ways. Since it's going to be bleeding out and running out, it's good to experiment with it and kind of see how to work with it, how it flows. But I hope you enjoy learning about this technique. It has a really cool effect on the fur and on the edges. You can use this for a bunch of different types of painting you're doing. Landscapes, animals, even people, different things like that. You can just learning how to create this edge. Learning how to create the soft edge is really helpful for watercolor painting. Thank you so much for painting with me today. Thank you so much for joining me on Mr. Otter Studio. I would love to see your work. Post it to Instagram using hashtag Mr. Otter Studio Black Cat, or just hashtag Mr. Otter Studio, and have a wonderful day. So as you can see, I tried a few more times, and in the end, my favorite ended up being the one that I did in the very beginning. So my advice to you would be to try this a few different times and work with this technique to get it to do what you want it to do. This effect can be really helpful for landscapes, for paintings of animals, even people. This nice soft edge is really nice for blurring things in the background and things like that. Thank you so much for painting with me on Mr. Otter Studio, and I would love to see your work. Post it to Instagram using hashtag Mr. Otter Studio or Mr. Otter Art Studio. Also, you can use hashtag Mr. Otter Studio Black Cat so I can see this specific painting. And have a wonderful day.